we have Juan Soto at 8.4, who is now playing half of his games in Yankee Stadium. He was traded there this offseason, entering a contract year at 25 years old. Last season hit a career-high 35 homers. It was his fourth straight year with more walks than strikeouts, which obviously gives him a huge boost in head-to-head points leagues. Last year, he finished as the 6th overall hitter in that format. He was the 16th overall player in Roto leagues. And Soto gets a clear ballpark upgrade moving from Petco Park to Yankee Stadium. Scott, I know you've pointed this out many times this offseason. Soto did not hit well in Petco in his career. 482 plate appearances there, a 231 batting average, and a 783 OPS. Chris, I'll throw this one your way. I know that you are the Juan Soto truther. What's the ceiling for this season in Yankee Stadium, and how high should he go in a head-to-head points league?
There is no limit. The limit does not exist. I don't like, okay, he's not going to be Ronald Acuna because he's not going to steal 70 bases. But if Juan Soto hit 40 home runs this season, I really wouldn't be shocked. His career high, I believe, is 35. Yeah, 35 last year. 270 combined runs and RBI as like an absolute ceiling outcome at the top of that lineup, hitting in front of Aaron Judge. I think that's reasonable for a guy who might have a 450 on base percent. Like, the ceiling is he's the best hitter in baseball. He might not be the best player in fantasy, but there's a top 3 fantasy ceiling because he'll probably also steal about 12 bases, something that he did last season and had been in like the 9 to 12 range before. So I think that's a reasonable expectation. Juan Soto is a weirdly controversial player. He got, at least in fantasy, I think he maybe got anointed as, a top 5 player a little too soon. I don't know if he's justified the cost when it's been that high, but he's arguably the best hitter in baseball. He's going into the Hall of Fame in, 20 years. Like, I don't have him ranked this high. We're talking about that ESPN ADP pushes him up ahead of, I would say, 3 guys we haven't talked about. One of whom is a second baseman, so I guess that's why we haven't talked about him. But 2 guys in the outfield who we will talk about very shortly, I have ranked higher than him. But I think Juan Soto is absolutely a first-round pick, and if you get him at the end of the first round, you should do a little dance.
Who are the 2 players?
I have Fernando Tatis and Aaron Judge ahead of him.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think it's debatable for all 3 for
sure. Yeah.
This
is where I think the obvious calls disappear.
And in points leagues, because Juan Soto's plate discipline is so good, he walks more than he strikes out. He's, to me, the number 3 overall player. But I want to talk because yes, there's been a lot of hand wringing over Juan Soto the past 2 years. What's wrong with him? Why is he not performing like he did at the start of his career, competing for batting titles and whatnot? Mm-hmm. I think it really is San Diego. Like, you could boil it down to he was playing in San Diego. And you mentioned, Frank, how bad his numbers were there. To give the other side of the coin, just last year, this past year, when some people would say he was a disappointment, on the road, Juan Soto hit 307 with 23 homers and a 1026 OPS. So he was basically the Juan Soto from Washington.
I'll just say Juan Soto was not a disappointment last year. And if you think he was, your standards are ridiculous.
I mean, he's a top 15 hitter. You drafted him higher than that. I get it. But now he's leaving Petco Park, the 5th worst home run venue for left-handed hitters, and going to Yankee Stadium, the 2nd best home run venue for left-handed hitters. So beyond just the batting average, we may be about to see the best Juan Soto we've ever seen. And with that trade that sent him to the Yankees, I went from saying, okay, I'm not sure we can do Juan Soto in round 1 again, maybe more like mid-round 2. Then he gets traded to the Yankees, and it's like, okay, Juan Soto, round 1. I'm back on board.
And that's probably like a top 5 pick in a points league, right, Scott? And maybe a back half first rounder in a Roto league.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time sorting out what I want to do between Soto, Tatis, and Judge. I mean, Tatis is the only one who gives you that speed element. Judge, of course, has massive 50-plus homer upside, but injury concerns. I think I've decided for categories leagues, for Roto leagues, Tatis, Soto. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, Tatis, Soto, Judge. Just playing it extra safe with Judge. But I think that's kind of its own sub-tier.
All three of them have the upside where if they finish as the number 2 player in fantasy next season, it wouldn't feel noteworthy. It
would be probably the most surprising for Soto, but I don't know. Like, he could hit 45 home runs this year and bat 320. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. Scoring 130 runs, batting ahead of Judge.
It is worth noting he does not have a swing optimized to take advantage of Yankee Stadium. At least historically, the way he swung, he doesn't tend to produce a lot of power down the lines. He produces a lot of power to the power alleys, and that's always been something where he's underperformed his expected stats, and his quality of contact is typically elite, top 4% of the league last season in terms of average exit velo. It's just he tends to hit it to the deep parts of the park, and in Yankee Stadium, I get my jokes off about how it's a little league park down the lines, but it's pretty deep to the power alleys. So if Soto hits 35 home runs, I also wouldn't be surprised. If he doesn't see a big boost in power, it wouldn't shock me either.
Oh, now Yankee Stadium is a deep ballpark all of a sudden, Chris. Oh, it's so interesting. I did want to point out, I think Soto is, I agree with all your points, Chris. I think Soto is the caliber of hitter where if he wants to change his approach a little bit to be more pull happy, he's good enough to do that. And maybe it's something he has done in 7 career games in Yankee Stadium. He has 4 home runs there. So again, he hasn't typically done that, but it wouldn't surprise me again if he changes the approach a little bit and taps into that 40, 45 home run upside this season. Let's pick things up with Aaron Judge. His ADP is 9.4. He's the 7th outfielder off the board. His season last year was derailed by a fractured toe, which limited him to just 106 games. Yankees GM Brian Cashman said this offseason that Judge's toe injury is, quote, a resolved issue. So I hope he's right. In 49 games before the injury happened, Judge was batting .291 with 19 homers. That is a 58 homer pace over 150 games. Somehow Judge managed to hit the ball harder than his 2022 MVP season. His average exit velocity went up to 97.6 miles per hour. This is not normal stuff. People don't do this stuff. It's really crazy what Aaron Judge is doing. He has tapped more into launch angle and pull rate the past couple of years. Before that, his career, he was more of a line drive hitter, and he was just so strong that the balls would fly out of the park. But now he's consciously trying to hit for power, and that's what's happened. Scott, you're already kind of on record, I guess, saying that you would go with Soto over Judge. Chris, how about you? Judge or Soto this season?
I do have Judge ahead of Soto. I actually have Judge ahead of Kyle Tucker in Roto as well. And it's partially what I was talking about earlier about the big hit, little hit comparison. Kyle Tucker's safer than Aaron Judge. I have a lot harder time seeing Kyle Tucker finishing as the number 2 player in fantasy. Whereas if you told me Aaron Judge played 150 games this year, I think I'd expect him to be the number 2 player in fantasy in both Roto or head-to-head points. I do think, obviously, he's 31, the injury history, that there are reasons to discount him, but his quality of contact, as you said, his average exit velocity, he was 95.9 miles per hour. He was top of the line, a level we've never seen before. And then he got better last season. It's a smaller sample size. Maybe it would have regressed. His expected WOBA on contact jumped from 611 last year, or in 2022, to 635 last season. That is absolutely bonkers. So I think Aaron Judge is the only player who I expect 50 home runs from if he stays healthy. I think gigantic counting stat numbers for him. It's just if he stays healthy.
I'm already hedging on that. I'm not sure I want Soto ahead of Judge. I actually saw an interesting tweet from Fred Zinke, on Fantasy Baseball Guy on Twitter. He was wondering, okay, Judge consensus top 4 pick last year. Some were taking him number 1 overall. That 2022 season, he was coming off that 62 home runs. He was almost as exceeded the rest of the hitter crop the way Ronald Acuna did last year. So why is he going in the back half of round one now? Just because he He hurt himself that one day at Dodger Stadium. And I mean, that's a part of why he's going later now. He reminded us all of his injury history, which is, that's not the only injury he's suffered. More years than not, he's missed significant time with an injury in the majors.
Has played less than 75% of his games in 4 of 7 seasons.
But the other reason why I think he's got to go later this year is because what I was saying earlier, there is a standard of player for Roto now that has never existed before, that didn't exist at this time last year. The first round caliber hitter who delivers massive stolen base totals. I looked it up, by the way. Corbin Carroll, 25 homers, 50 steals. The last time a player had done that. Obviously, Acuna did the same thing last year, exceeded it. But Hanley Ramirez in 2007. That was the last time a player did that. And before that, the last time a player had 25
it's
homers.
Like Eric Young or someone
in a season. Barry Bonds in 1990. So in the same year, Acuna and Corbin Carroll both became 2 of only 3 players in the last 32 years to have a 25 homer, 50 steal season. And they did it in the same year. And one of them did it as a rookie. And that just, again, underscores that. But how do you justify taking Judge higher than 5th, even if you don't account for injury risk at all?
But here's the thing. You could argue that Judge is also an archetype of player who does not exist historically, because the number of players who you would project for 50 home runs in a season, it's like Babe Ruth. And then 3 guys in the steroid era.
I get what you're saying,
a lot of people
50 homer seasons have been a lot more common than 25, 50 steal seasons over the years.
I think what Chris is saying is that Judge can finish as the number 2 player if he stays healthy, and it'll just be because he's so much better than the field. Other stats, right? Like he can be the number 2 player, kind of the way Porter finishes as a top 40 player in Roto, even though he has a terrible batting average. He gives you so many home runs.
It could. Yeah. I mean, who was the number 2 player last year? It was Matt Olson. It was not one of those stolen base guys.
So Judge can do that.
He could.
Yeah.
But when you have the chance at a 40 to 50 steal guy,
well, and I agree with you.
I think the other way to put it is when you get Julio Rodriguez, when you get Bobby Witt, when you get Corbin Carroll, what that means is that when you get to, I don't know, the 8th round, 9th round, 10th round, you don't start to look at your team and say, oh God, do I need to draft Esteury Ruiz? I think that's the other way to phrase it is like, yeah, Aaron Judge might hit 55 home runs and drive in 140 runs. Like he might have that kind of season. But from a team building and a roster perspective, he presents some complications in a traditional Roto league. I think it's only true in a traditional Roto league, though. I think in a head-to-head categories league, it becomes much less of a concern. I think in a head-to-head points league, he's clearly ahead of those guys.
Sure.
Just when you're trying to build a traditional 12 or 15 team Roto team, drafting Aaron Judge ahead of Corbin Carroll, Julio Rodriguez, any of those guys, presents some complications.
And to be clear, I like Aaron Judge, and I think this he's injury prone is a little bit overblown because I don't think that toe injury was technically his fault last year, but I wouldn't take him ahead of any of those names either. So just to be clear on that front, I would take him ahead of Juan Soto, regardless of format, in a points league or in a Roto league.